Extremely toxic best friend story time. So when I was in 8th grade, there was this boy. And this boy would go around telling almost every girl that he liked her. And I was one of those girls. And he would do stuff with all of us. And there were like 11 of us. So we all hated each other. Especially this one girl, and we're gonna call her Abby. And every time we saw each other, we would be super mean to each other. Well, a year passed, we stopped talking to this kid. And I bumped into her at homecoming and basically apologized. So after that, we became best friends. And everything was good until every time I told her about a guy, she would start talking to them. Like this one boy that I was Snapchatting and talking to, she accidentally sent nudes to him and said, "Oh, sorry, I meant to send them to my boyfriend." So then she called one of my other best friends and said, "No, it actually wasn't an accident." And of course he told me because he was my best friend. So I was like, whatever, and stopped talking to the boy. And she did it again, like for part 2. Extremely toxic best friend part 2. So pretty much her excuse for that was, oh, well, he said that he was gonna leak my nudes if I didn't send him them again. Which was a lie because literally half the school already had her nudes. So then I started talking to this other boy. And he lived like right down the street from her. So she was like, if you want to go to his house, you can. And I was like, are you sure? And she said, yeah, just go tell my mom. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went and told her mom where I was going and went over his house. So I walked back to her house and she literally locked me out. Like her mom had to come open the door for me to let me in. And she was like, oh, it's a good thing you came back when you did. Because I was going to drive you home now and tell your dad everything that you did. And she goes, I don't think you guys should be together because you're unexperienced. And she would always tell me how he flirts with her all the time. So after our friendship ended, she goes, I just felt like it was always a competition between me and you. Storytime about how my boyfriend was cheating on me with my stepsister. So a little background information, my mom remarried whenever I was in 8th grade. And my stepdad had 2 daughters. One which was my age and we got along really well. Well, before my sisters and I went back to school, my mom wanted to go on a camping trip with everyone. And my boyfriend was coming because he was really close with my family. So while my stepsister and I are packing up, she starts acting really weird. And we're gonna call my boyfriend Kevin. She was like, oh, is Kevin still coming with us? And I was like, yeah. And then she goes, oh, are you and Kevin still together? And I'm like, we were never broken up. Like, the fuck? Like I said, she was just being super fucking weird. But anyways, we all get in the car, we drive up there, and her and Kevin start being super weird around each other. Like, they were being too touchy. Anytime that I wanted to go do something with Kevin, she would say, oh, Kevin, you can come do this instead. Well, that night, Kevin and I are sleeping in our tent. At least I thought he was. And I wake up to some loud noises in the other tent, like for part 2. Part 2. So like I said, I heard a bunch of noises and talking in my stepsister's tent, and I wake up and my boyfriend isn't in the tent. So I'd be very quiet getting out of my tent, and I go over to hers and I just listen. And oh bitch, I should have just confronted them because I got my motherfucking feelings hurt. He was telling her how he didn't love me at all and how he only wanted to be with her, and how every time that they kissed each other and screwed each other, he felt such a connection between them. So not only was he cheating physically, but they had a connection. Wonderful. So I open her tent and I confront them. This was the most degrading thing I've ever went through in my life. And I said, I heard you guys outside. And I'm just not the type of girl who's going to come at another girl because my man wants her. Because at that point, he's not my man. She goes, sit down, sweetie, we need to talk. Apparently they're in love. So they started dating. They're still dating. And my parents allowed it. So I distanced myself from all of them.
Storytime, my toxic best friend outed me to the entire school. So one day, one of my best friends from a neighboring school decided to move to my school, and she was extremely upset because her best friend over there came out as bi. So I ended up using this as an opportunity to come out bi as well. And she was like, well, it's okay for you. I just got really close to her. We'll call the girl Becky because no one likes a Becky. And we can call her friend Heather. So fast forward to after the situation had calmed down, we decided to all go prom dress shopping. So Heather and I were talking and we really hit it off. And I think Becky legitimately forgot about our sexuality because we were all talking about how much we have in common, and we brought that up as well. She just looked at us and was like, oh, I forgot about that. And she just shrugged it off. But we continued to hang out for a few weeks. One of these weekends, we all went to church together, and the sermon was about how God accepts you no matter what your sexuality is. But of course, Becky turns around to us and says that Heather and I could never date because it would F everything up. Later that day, Heather actually ended up admitting that she had feelings for me, and this is when Becky lost it. Stay tuned for part 2 and follow me on Instagram. Part 2 of my toxic best friend outing me to the entire school. So at the beach later that day, Heather and I decided to tell Becky how we felt. She freaked and wouldn't talk to us and locked herself in the bathroom. And we had to tell her that it's fine, we won't date, just so she would let herself out. I thought she was being entirely selfish, not wanting her best friends to be happy. And then she literally took my phone and went through all of our texts together. She woke up the next day all ready for Heather and I to be together and completely apologized. And then when we went to the mall that day, she walked away from us to go look at the hot guys, but then turned around and got pissed at us for falling behind. And this is why she said she didn't want us to date, yet we weren't even dating. She said she felt like she was gonna have to choose between Heather and I because of the whole situation, and I guess she just picked me. Becky became extremely codependent and didn't want to leave my side. She was pissed if I spent time with anyone else and basically forced Heather out of my life. I ended up running into Heather and inviting her to my 18th birthday, and this is when Becky had her massive breakdown. At my birthday, she outed me to everyone at the party, my mom, and Heather's mom as well. My Insta is linked below for more content.
When I was a little kid, my dad tried to publicly embarrass me, but he did not know he was raising a bad bitch. So one day I came home and I was having a real bad day at school and I was crying, I was. And my dad looked at me, he's like, you better stop that crying, that's girly. And what did I do? I kept crying. He looked at me, he's like, yeah, get up, we're going to the store. I'm like, why are we going to the store right now? What? He says, since you wanna be girly by crying, we're gonna go get you a dress. And you're gonna walk around the store in that dress so everybody can see how girly you are. At first I was like, no, please, that's gonna be so embarrassing, Dad, no. We still went to the store. My dad hands me this black dress and says, go in the fitting room and change into it. I put it on, I look into the mirror, and I was like, damn, bitch, I look good. I walked out of that damn fitting room strutting my shit. My dad was like, you're not embarrassed? I was like, why the hell I'm about to be embarrassed looking like this?
Like in elementary, I was bullied a lot. One day, this girl, we're gonna call her Jenny. Jenny was having a birthday party, so obviously I wasn't invited, so I basically begged for an invitation. And I remember Jenny was like, okay, if you're like my servant for like a week, like I'll give you an invitation. Long story short, I was a servant for a week and she gave me an invitation to her party. This is the best part! It's the best part! So finally, party day came. My mom was driving me to the party. We were going to the address that the girl gave me. So we finally get to the house. The house was looking dead. Like it didn't have balloons, nothing. So I was like, maybe they're just not done decorating. So I go and knock the door. And you know who answers the door? You're never gonna guess who. My fucking teacher. It was my teacher's house. Jenny gave me the address of my teacher, not her fucking birthday party.
Storytime about how I got an insane stalker from working at a strip club and professionally cuddling. Professionally cuddling is like platonic touch therapy. I'm essentially paid $100 an hour to listen to clients vent and non-sexually cuddle them. I met lots of different clients, both good and bad. You can always tell who's good or bad by their karma. A karma is like a review. One of my clients who was especially respectful was named George, and I will tell you why George is very sus later on. He was really chill and he would take me out to do anything I wanted to do, such as restaurants or mini golfing. Even if we weren't cuddling, he'd still pay me. Gotta get that bag. While I did spend a lot of my time with him, I did have other clients. One person after him that we'll call Tim left a review on my karma, saying that I was the best cuddler. The next day, I woke up to the site banning me for inappropriate behavior. There was fake inappropriate screenshots sent in, where someone was clearly using photos you could easily find on my Instagram. And the text literally said, I'll even let you touch my butt. Like, who even talks like that? Then Tim sent me a screenshot of him getting a message from a random number. That's when I realized it may have had to do with his review. I quickly got my account back because I let the site know I was being harassed, but this is when things got worse. Stay tuned for part 2 and follow me on Instagram. Storytime about my crazy stalker that I got from professionally cuddling and working at a strip club. So not long after I got my banned account back, I received a message from a random number telling me to delete my account by 10 p.m. that night, or else they would tell my family that I was professionally cuddling. They sent my mom, dad, and stepmom's number in the text, so I knew they were serious. I was like, who are you and why are you doing this? And they claimed that they were an old friend from high school and that they were extremely concerned about me and that the old me wouldn't have done this. This didn't sound like anyone I knew, but I decided that I was just going to go ahead and tell my parents because I did not want anyone holding anything over me. So I let my parents know and they were extremely supportive. And when I didn't delete my account and they reached out, my mom clapped back at this person and said if they were actually my friend, they would support me and not conceal their identity. Fast forward a little bit, I started working at a strip club. I thought the stalker stuff was done. Not long after I liked the Facebook page of the strip club I was working at, I received a text from a random number asking if I worked at that strip club with a photo of me from that Facebook page. This is when I got an even bigger threat than before. Stay tuned for the next part and follow me on Instagram. Storytime part 3 about my crazy stalker that I got from professionally cuddling and working at a strip club. So after my stalker found out that I was working at a strip club, he sent me my next threat. Because he found out through Facebook, he got a hold of all my friends and family list. Guys, I honestly recommend keeping your Facebook friends private. And he was gonna tell them all by 10 p.m. if I don't quit. I picked up the phone and started yelling at him, and all I heard was silence on the other end. So then a Facebook page named Kathy, who was like an old lady and obviously was a fake Facebook, sent this message to everyone with the photo of me working at the strip club, including my grandma. Like, are you trying to give my grandma a heart attack? So I had to explain to everyone that I was working there but not as a stripper. This is when George reached back out to me, saying that he also got the same message from Kathy. But how would this mysterious Instagram know to message him? He was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're working at a strip club with all those dirty old men. He offered to help and said I should quit, and that's when I put the pieces together that he was my stalker. I was able to compile the evidence together and get my old account back, which he'd banned again. And I haven't heard from him since. If you have a story like this, follow me on Instagram and shoot me a DM.
Storytime Tinder edition. Okay, the story blew up on Twitter like a while ago, but I'm just gonna retell it because it's very informational. So there was this guy and this girl, and they met through Tinder, and then they met up and they went on this date. And they were out at dinner, and then she starts not feeling so well. And then she says, I really need to go home. And he says, yeah, I'll drive you home. And she says, okay. So then they get to her house, and then she starts feeling better. So then she says, do you want to come in for some coffee? And then he says, yeah, sure. So they go inside, they have their coffee, and then she doesn't feel well again. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't feel well again. I think you really need to leave. And he's like, okay. And he leaves. And then she goes to bed, and in the middle of the night, she wakes up and she hears this noise down in her kitchen. And so she locks her door and she calls the cop. And the 911 operator is just on the other line saying, can you just stay on the line until the cops get there? And then the cops get there and they're like, the door is locked. Like, we don't think anyone's inside. And she's like, I promise you, someone's inside my house. I can hear them. She says, you have my permission to break down the door. So she's still up in her room, and then she hears the cops break down the door. And then she hears some rustling and some fighting. Part 2 coming now. Part 2 of the Tinder story. So then after the cops break down the door, they go upstairs and they knock on her door, and they're like, it's okay, we've got the guy, everything's fine. And they say to her, we don't really want you to stay here tonight. We don't think that you should see what he's done. And when I say he, it's the guy that she went on a date with. And she's like, no, I need to see what he's done. So she goes downstairs and she sees her kitchen wrapped all in plastic, and there's a saw and a hammer and a knife. And earlier when he came into her house for coffee, he set his keys down right next to her keys. And so when he left, he picked up both sets of keys. And that is how he got back into her house. And they tested her, like her blood and everything, and she wasn't supposed to wake up because of how many drugs were in her system, because on the date, he drugged her. And then I guess he was just planning on chopping up her body in her own kitchen. I don't know. Stay safe.